Welcome back to MythVision Podcast. Dr. Joshua Bowen. Hope you're doing well, brother.
I am here.
I'm glad. I'm so glad you're here. We're in my house. We got a little something of a setup going. We don't even know where this is going, but we hope you follow along. Be sure to check out his books and the courses that he's done with MVP courses. You will not want to miss those. I promise you, 7 lectures in each.
Mm-hmm.
One on biblical slavery, which is our question today.
Yep.
And the other is on ancient myths that influence the Bible.
That's right.
Excellent. Okay, I have a Patreon question from Jimmy Tux. And he says, in my accusations of slavery in the Bible with the Christian, many want to look the other way or remind me, oh, that's just the Old Testament, outdated laws. I often say, give me a break. You exclaim the 10 Commandments, yeah? It's the next chapter. In your vast experience, Dr. Josh, in such conversations, how is the best way to identify the issue or epistemological approach to help the Christian understand?
Yeah, so that is a common apologetic response that you run into. It normally goes, in my experience like this, they'll start to say, oh, well, it's just the warm, cuddly kind of slavery like Rationality Rules was telling us earlier. But then once you start to press back and say, well, actually, here, let's look at what these passages actually say, then they will ultimately go, well, but it's the Old Testament anyway, right? So it's sort of this, it's shifting the goalpost, right? So I suppose for me, once you invoke theology, we're starting to leave a little bit of what I care about. Because like people's theological interpretations, hey, have at it. But that's what that is, right? That's somebody saying, well, okay, the text does say that. And in its, from a historical critical standpoint, yes, this is describing debt, chattel, and sexual slavery. But my theological approach tells me that there's this later testament that sort of does away with all this old stuff. And at that point, it's like, well, you're going to have to talk to a theologian because, I'm starting to lose interest, right? But I think part of the problem, if you do try to engage in it that way, is you really, I think, run into problems with things that Jesus says, right? This idea of like coming to fulfill the law. I don't think what he means by that is like all the morals that we have back in the Hebrew Bible, like they were all nonsense. You don't have to worry about it. People really lean hard on Matthew 19, right, where Jesus is being challenged by the Pharisees, and he says, well, hardness of the hearts. But I mean, if you think about what Jesus does, and again, we're outside of my area of expertise, so I won't be here for long. But
yeah, but it's not that you haven't read. I mean, Jennifer Glancy.
Yeah,
come on.
yeah. I think that Jesus is calling to a higher level of morality, not a lower one.
Right.
Right. So
So if you were a slave, be an even better slave.
Yeah. And I think that for me, this is just an escape route. Right? This is a way when all else has failed, they will say, well, it's the Old Testament. But I think the problem is, from a morality standpoint, is that you have to deal with the fact that you have, ostensibly here, according to Christian theology, the triomni God who is giving laws on Mount Sinai and saying slavery okay, right? And I just don't think that appealing to, even if you wanted to appeal to the divorce thing in Matthew 19, if you viewed putting away your wife for any reason as a bad thing, I don't think you get an escape by using Matthew 19.
Right.
Because it's like me saying, well, yeah, I allowed my kids to like physically beat each other, right? Well, it was because of the hardness of their hearts that I did that. Well, that doesn't get me off the hook, right? Because it's something that I'm allowing for whatever reason. It's something that I'm allowing. So again, it's a theological issue, and so I want to obviously caveat it in that way. But I think it's trying to get out the back door without having to actually deal with what the text says. And B, or two, I just don't think it honestly engages with the fact that these, according to the narrative, divinely handed down laws endorse the practice of debt, chattel, and sexual slavery.
I was interviewing Dr. Dennis R. McDonald not too long ago, but he says this often throughout my interviews if you pick it up. And he says, theology to me is a 4-letter word. That tells you what he thinks about it.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. It's clever. To me, it's the human imagination trying to make things make sense. And it reminds me of philosophy in a way. I'm sure there's overlap. But the point is you know how people in philosophy, as you've encountered, can have so many different views. And it's like, okay, anything goes. I like to refer to it as mental masturbation because it's like you can make almost anything sound legit. I mean, are you a brain in a vat that just, 5 minutes ago concocted your entire existence? You can make up stuff. And that just doesn't make sense to me. That's not the best position to hold to. And you're right. That's why I brought up Jennifer Glancy, because you referred her to me in terms of wanting to interview. She gave me a chance and we interviewed. And an interesting note, she highlights in her book, I have the book over there on the shelf, a moral problem. Slavery is a moral problem for Christianity, and points out the Essenes, literally some, she's not sure if the whole group or if it was just some in the community, condemned it as a crime against humanity to own another human. Now, I know you can go into other ancient Near Eastern examples, but I just want to highlight this is a contemporary. And many people ask the question, was Jesus in a scene, right? There's other people who want to try and, because he has some overlap to things they do, but then he has some things that they don't agree with him on, and that's it. But they're condemning it, and here's Jesus in the Gospels. If he really said this, that's how critical we get on MythVision.
Right. Literally
using it as an example on how to be.
Yeah, Luke
Check
17.
it out. The slave owner doesn't come home after being in the field.
I will say this, and this may be an effective approach for Jimmy to take. And by the way, Jimmy's a great guy. I loved interacting with him. But this may be a useful approach because I might, and I guess I sometimes do, when someone says something like that to me, I go, whew, good. So you don't think that all of these things in the Old Testament, great. You have an interpretive approach where you're seeing your own moral progress. You're seeing your own ethical progress. Great. We don't have to be beholden to an ancient text. You're one step closer to doing that because they're not doing that. They're not coming up with, the Old Testament's the Old Testament, New Testament's, right, because strictly for some theological reason. They're doing it because they see a problem, morally speaking, with owning another person as property. And to me, good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
At least they're not saying, yep, it says slavery. Yep, it's chattel slavery. Yep, I'm going to follow it. And now I'm going to try to elect officials so that we can get slavery brought back in. At least they're not doing that, right? And so maybe we can see this as the silver lining, and we can say they're hopefully starting to make a step toward operating based on the moral progress that they have and interpreting those texts through the light of that moral progress.
Thank you.